You are 5 years old, strapped into a go-kart that barely reaches your knees, with no idea this tiny machine is the first rung on one of the most brutal ladders in professional sport. Somewhere right now, a child exactly like you is doing the same thing. Only one or two of you will ever sit in a Formula One car. The rest will spend a fortune finding that out. This is the real story of how a person becomes a Formula One driver, and it has almost nothing to do with talent alone. Start at the bottom, because everyone does. Karting is where it begins, usually between the ages of 5 and 8. Not go-karts at a birthday party, competitive karting, with a license, a category, and a calendar of races that never stops. A serious junior karting season can cost a family anywhere from $30,000 to over $100,000 a year once you include the kart itself, engine rebuilds, tires, travel, and coaching. And that's before anyone has heard your name. Why so much cost? Because karting isn't really about the kart, it's about repetition. A driver here might turn thousands of laps a year, building reflexes that can't be taught later. Racing psychologists studying elite performance, including work associated with Anders Ericsson's research on deliberate practice, describe this exact pattern. Skills built before adolescence, repeated under real pressure, wire into the body in a way that's almost impossible to replicate as an adult. This is why almost every current Formula One driver started karting before age 10. Lewis Hamilton was 6, Max Verstappen was 4. Here's what most outsiders don't expect. Even at 8 years old, this is already a business. Families start looking for sponsors almost immediately because very few parents can fund a racing career alone past the first year or two. Local businesses, family friends, small regional deals, unglamorous. Necessary because the sport doesn't get cheaper as you go, it gets dramatically more expensive. Assuming a young driver performs well in national karting and starts winning regional and international titles by their early teens, the next step is single-seater racing, Formula 4. This is the first time a driver sits in an actual open-wheel racing car, and the cost jumps again, often to $200,000 or more per season. Formula 4 exists specifically as a feeder category, a proving ground where scouts from bigger teams start paying attention. But scouts don't just want fast lap times, they want composure. A driver who can finish fourth after starting last without throwing away the car. That's more valuable long-term than a driver who wins recklessly. From Formula 4, the ladder continues into Formula 3, then Formula 2, each step roughly doubling or tripling in cost and stakes. By Formula 2, a competitive season budget can exceed $2 million. At this point, pure family funding almost never covers it. This is where manufacturer young driver programs become critical. Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, and others all run academies that scout, fund, and mentor a small handful of drivers each generation. Getting accepted into one of these programs is often more important than any single race result because it means the financial burden shifts from your family to a Formula One team's development budget. But here's the twist that surprises people. These academy seats are not just about speed. Team principals and sporting directors, including public comments from figures like Red Bull's Helmut Marko, have repeatedly emphasized that inconsistency eliminates more prospects than lack of raw pace. A driver who qualifies on pole but crashes out chasing glory gets dropped faster than a driver who consistently finishes in the top 5. Formula One doesn't just want the fastest driver in the world, it wants the fastest driver who can also be trusted with an entire team season and a car worth millions. By Formula 2, most competitors are 18 to 22. This is also where the field ruthlessly narrows. Dozens of promising Formula 4 drivers become a handful of realistic Formula 1 prospects, simply because cost and pressure eliminate almost everyone who doesn't have both results and backing. Sports scientists studying attrition in elite motorsport pathways note this drop-off resembles a funnel far steeper than most traditional sports, closer to the odds of becoming a professional astronaut than a professional footballer. Assuming a driver survives Formula 2 with strong results, ideally a championship or podium finishes, the final step is a Formula 1 seat. Here is where most people's understanding breaks down. Talent and results open the door, but rarely walk you through it alone. Every Formula 1 seat exists because of a business decision.
Teams need sponsorship revenue, and drivers who bring personal sponsorship deals, sometimes called pay drivers, remain part of the sport's financial reality even today. The idea that Formula 1 is a pure meritocracy, where the fastest driver always gets the seat, is, according to most people inside the paddock, simply not how it has ever worked. So picture the full pathway laid out end to end. A 5-year-old in a kart, a teenager funded partly by sponsors and partly by manufacturer scouting, a 20-year-old absorbed into a team academy, driving cars that cost more than most people's houses, judged as much on composure and marketability as outright speed. And finally, if every piece aligns, a seat in one of only 20 cars that exist on the entire planet at any given time. That number is worth sitting with for a second. 20 seats. Not 20 per year, 20 total across the whole world at any single moment. Every driver currently in Formula One took someone else's seat away from them to get there, and will eventually lose theirs to someone climbing that exact same ladder behind them right now. This is why the story of becoming a Formula One driver isn't really a story about speed. It's a story about survival through a system engineered to eliminate almost everyone who enters it. The driver who makes it isn't necessarily the most talented 5-year-old in that first go-kart. They're the one who kept performing under pressure at every single narrowing point, who found funding when funding ran out, who stayed composed when composure mattered more than victory, and who got noticed by exactly the right person at exactly the right moment, sometimes across more than 15 years of racing before ever touching a Formula One car. Now think about anything you've ever pursued that required years of incremental progress before any real payoff. A career, a skill, a long personal goal. The Formula One pathway is an extreme version of something familiar to almost everyone. Early effort that looks disproportionate to the reward. Gatekeepers who evaluate you on more than raw ability. A field that narrows dramatically the closer you get to the top. Let's look closer at what actually happens inside that narrowing, because the mechanics are more interesting than the outcome. At the karting stage, most children racing competitively are not chasing Formula One. Their parents just hope motorsport builds discipline, focus, and confidence. It's only around age 10 or 11, once a child starts consistently beating older, more experienced drivers, that anyone begins whispering Formula One potential. That whisper changes everything. Suddenly, a hobby with a 5-figure price tag becomes a 6-figure investment, because a family that believes their child might have a real shot will find any way possible to fund the next season. This is where sponsorship search intensifies from casual to relentless. Family businesses get involved. Regional companies looking for local visibility get pitched. Some families remortgage homes. Others run out of money, and the driver's career quietly ends at 14. Not because they lacked talent, but because talent alone was never enough. Motorsport economists studying junior racing pathways note this financial filtering happens years before most fans start paying attention, meaning a huge percentage of a generation's fastest drivers are eliminated for reasons that have nothing to do with driving ability. The drivers who survive this first financial cut and keep winning eventually attract attention from a different kind of institution, the Manufacturer Young Driver Program. These programs function almost like sports academies crossed with talent agencies. A prospective driver might be invited to a scouting event, tested not just on lap times, but on physical fitness, media presentation, sponsor interaction, and even how they handle interviews after a bad race. Formula One is a televised global sport, and a driver who can't communicate with fans or sponsors is a harder product to sell, regardless of how fast they are on track. Once accepted into an academy, a young driver's life changes structurally. Physical training becomes rigorous and constant because modern Formula One cars subject drivers to sustained forces requiring serious cardiovascular and neck strength most people never develop. Reaction time training, simulator sessions, and data analysis become as routine as the racing itself. Sports scientists who study Formula One physical preparation note that drivers here often train more like endurance athletes than traditional racers, because a 2-hour Grand Prix under extreme G-forces and heat demands conditioning closer to a professional marathon runner than most people assume. Meanwhile, the racing keeps climbing in stakes.
Formula 4 into Formula 3 into Formula 2 isn't just a cost increase, it's an information gathering exercise for the teams watching. Every race, every qualifying lap, every mistake becomes data. How does this driver handle wet conditions? How do they react after contact with another car? Do they blame others, or do they analyze their own mistakes calmly afterward? Team principals have said publicly many times over the years that they aren't just hiring the fastest driver. They're hiring someone who will represent a brand worth billions of dollars every single time a camera points at them. This is also the stage where a driver's management team becomes as important as their racing team. Driver managers negotiate seats, manage sponsor relationships, and often shape public image almost like a talent agent would in entertainment. The driver who reaches Formula 2 with a strong manager and stable manufacturer backing has a meaningfully different path than an equally fast driver without that infrastructure. This isn't a popular thing to say about a sport built on speed, but multiple retired drivers and team insiders have echoed the same idea in interviews over the years.
Two equally talented drivers can have completely different careers based on who is representing them off the track. By the time a driver reaches the edge of Formula One itself, they've usually spent somewhere between 12 and 18 years inside this system. They've survived financial elimination, physical elimination, and reputational elimination. They've been tested not just on raw speed, but on composure, marketability, and business value. And even then, getting an actual seat often comes down to something almost accidental. A current driver retiring at the right moment, a sponsor pulling out and reshuffling a team's budget, or a manufacturer needing a specific nationality or region represented for commercial reasons tied to a new market they're trying to break into. This is the part that reframes the entire story. From the outside, becoming a Formula One driver looks like the purest expression of raw human speed and skill. From the inside, it looks more like navigating a 15-year filtration system where financial survival, physical conditioning, media training, and business relationships matter just as much as reaction time. The 5-year-old in the go-kart has no concept of any of this. They just want to go fast. Everything else, the money, the politics, the composure under pressure, that's the part of the story nobody tells you when you're small enough for your feet to barely reach the pedals. And that's really the point worth carrying with you. Whatever ladder you're climbing in your own life, career, craft, or ambition, the visible skill at the top is rarely the whole story. Somewhere beneath it is a much longer, much less glamorous filtering process, one that rewards people who can survive setbacks, adapt under pressure, and keep showing up long after the excitement of the beginning has worn off. Formula One just makes that process impossible to hide because it happens on television, in front of millions of people, one narrowing lap at a time.